Hi guys, today I'll be breaking down section C, so Analysing Argument section of the 2017 VCE English exam. This exam is available on the VCAR website, just search 2017 VCE exam, and the full copy of the exam as well as the examiner reports are publicly available there, as well as of course previous year exams, so I recommend you have a look. What I'm going to do, I've read this piece and I've created a response to it, but I just wanted to kind of just talk you through my thinking about what's coming up for me as I read this, and hopefully that will give you some pointers as to how to do all the tough thinking work, I guess, before you jump into writing your exam response. So basically, I'm going to hopefully take you through what the first 15 minutes of reading time will look like in your head, except I'm going to be talking instead of thinking. So a bit of a reminder on Section C, you would have seen my video about the task requirements of Section C and a little bit about the structure of body paragraphs and the whole essay, so I won't go through that. But I did mention in there that we always want to read the background information, which will provide us with some really good context as to what has been written and why. And often background info is really useful for your introduction as well. So we can see here that the principal of Spire Primary School writes a weekly message for the school's website. She invites comments, favourable or unfavourable, to be posted after her message appears. The principal has been concerned about the amount of packaging waste she has seen around the school. Her messaging about this concern and a response from one parent are on pages 12 and 13. So already I've got most of the information that I need for my introduction. I can almost write it right now. So I know the author. I know there are two texts, the weekly message and a comment from a parent. I know that the author of the weekly message is the principal of Spire Primary School, and the author of the comment is a parent. I know that the issue appears to be the amount of packaging waste in the school community. And the audience, if it's on the school website, is likely to be the school community, I would imagine particularly parents. So all of the information that I've got here can be kind of reworked into a really simple introduction. We also note as well here, I just realised that I've forgotten this in my introduction, but we do have a date, 8th of July 2017, which counts as part of the publication details that we can include in the introduction. I won't read this aloud. What I'll do is I'll just kind of go through and we can kind of read through parts of it together. And then I'll take you through what I've actually written. So the principal's message goes for about a page and a half. It's obviously published on the website, and you can see they've got a header here with a logo. So this is our first visual. I didn't analyse this in my piece, but I would certainly encourage you to analyse any visual elements you see, even if they're not the primary visual, which is obviously this photo here of all the plastic bags. Particularly in something that is going to be about packaging waste and therefore the environment, a picture of a tree in a school's logo is certainly something that might have something behind it. But like I mentioned, you can't cover everything. Okay, dear parents of Spire Primary School, bam, there's our audience. So we are speaking specifically to primary school parents. When we think about the audience, we've got to think about, okay, what do we know about primary school parents? These are probably busy people, they're probably working, they're trying to juggle work with children. They obviously care very deeply about their kids. They might be actively involved in the school community, particularly if they're reading the newsletter. So already we've got a bit of a picture about this audience. So let's see what she says. She starts by, I write to you this week to introduce a new concept for us all to think about. Oh no, I hear you say, she's got another idea. It's true that I often take this school down new paths, especially in areas that affect the preservation of our planet. So what stood out to me here is this, oh no, I hear you say, she's got another idea. it's an attempt at humor here. She's trying to be a little bit self-deprecating, which basically kind of means she's kind of just sort of taking the piss. Um, she's gently imitating herself in a way that shows that she doesn't take herself too seriously. It makes her more approachable, and therefore, whoever's reading this um, isn't going to get the impression that she, is some lofty principle that isn't in touch with herself or with the local community. That she's actually pretty approachable. And she admits this. It is true that I often take this school down new paths. Um, she then goes on to say this: we're the only school that has a walk or pedal to school day once a week, by then once a month or even once a term. We have 4 different bins for our waste products, not just 3. Our vegetable garden is truly organic and our pet hens scratch and roam as they wish. But I think we at Spire can do more. We are responsible for the future of our world. Okay, so these couple of sentences, what's she saying? Well, she's congratulating her school community on all of the great environmental initiatives that they already have. So the reader's going to think, is probably going to feel some pride in their school, and is going to be positioned to see the school as a place where the environment is forefront, and that they have been successful in implementing measures that help the environment. The way she does this, so the how, look at the inclusive language. We've got we and our, we at Spire. These aren't her achievements. She's positioning readers to see them as everyone's achievements. These are school achievements. She also uses exclamation marks to get some enthusiasm behind them. She's trying to make the readers feel enthusiastic about them too and feel a sense of pride. She doesn't kind of introduce her ask, I suppose, her desire to introduce a new initiative until the end. And that's important. So we need to think about, when we talk about structure, we think of particularly about the order of arguments. So think about why this woman, why this principal would first present herself as, kind of approachable, but ultimately pretty progressive and forward thinking. And then why would she start by this little bit of self-congratulation for the school before going into what she actually wants us to do? So far, this is pretty upbeat. Things change now in this paragraph. We've got this image that is really, it grabs your eye, doesn't it, at this stage? You kind of can't help staring at it. So we've got this image, and, if you look at, I think even the front page of The Age, the next day after the exam, had a picture of this image because it kind of, it was really notable in that it is literally a pile of rubbish. It's black and white. We see these mounds of identical bulging black plastic bags. We see either clouds or smoke, maybe smog. They kind of seem to go off forever into the distance. And it's a really bleak, depressing image. The tone is overall, yes, bleak and depressing. Think about what it suggests when we think about the environment. This is danger. This is real doom and gloom. This is, probably a huge, potentially an exaggeration of what could happen necessarily in the school ground. But we are positioned to think of the negative effects of excess, of what the newsletter will be about, which is excess packaging. So the tone of this image is designed to really complement what she's saying here, which is, I've become increasingly concerned about the amount of superfluous packaging in our everyday lives. Remember, you have a dictionary next to you. If superfluous is a word that you aren't 100% sure of, a dictionary you can be using in your reading time to confirm that you understand it. So superfluous just means excess, too much, extra. So excess packaging in our everyday lives. The newspaper in plastic, hamburgers in boxes, individual packets of tissues, little packets of rice crackers and chips. You might say that the material from which these containers are made from are biodegradable or recyclable, but they still exist, are still clogging our bins and eventually our country. If we do not do something positive about this now, the environmental damage will be irreversible. And it's that phrase there, the environmental damage will be irreversible, that to me really links with um, this image. So often images are used to reinforce ideas in the text, and I think this is an example of one. Um, Note that she isn't specific about what the environmental damage is in her text. She just leaves us with this image, so our minds can kind of get to work. So visuals are really powerful in imagining a scary future, and we're now imagining a very frightening one. Note that she continues to use inclusive language, our everyday lives, our country, if we do not do something about this. She's encouraging a sense of shared responsibility, but she isn't yet talking directly about the school. She's talking about excess packaging as a global problem. So she said, school's great, going really well, but we can do more. And then she's introduced this really big problem, which, if you've been positioned to see yourself as a school community member as a bit of an environmentalist, and you're then presented with an environmental problem, that's a deliberate way for her to try and make you, as a parent, more receptive to fixing that problem. So basically, she starts big, she starts global, and then she gets local. She brings it into the schoolyard. Last week, I walked around the grounds at recess time, talking as I do with any student who wanted to chat. Many, I am glad to say. So here she is, again, presenting herself as approachable, as a principal who's in touch with the kids, who, is child friendly and cares about these kids. I kept seeing your children. Now the responsibility shifts a little bit. Your children holding little plastic packets with a few biscuits in one side and some cheese spread in the other. When the children had eaten, the little packets became waste material. I found myself wondering why those biscuits could not have been spread with cheese at home and brought to school in a reusable container. Other children were drinking juice from cardboard boxes. Why not a washable plastic bottle? At our canteen, I saw a child buy a sushi roll and apply soy sauce from a cute little plastic fish. That fish ended up on the ground until I asked the student to put it in the bin. More rubbish. Why not use a common flask from which the sauce could be pumped at the counter? For that matter, how awful are those little tomato sauce containers given with meat pies? Lethal if flipped in your eye. So she presents example after example, I think, in total 3 or 4 of them, about kids kind of literally walking around the schoolyard with countless examples of all of this excess waste. And, we're still on the same page as this image. So we're positioned to see that all of those, cute little plastic fish and, the biscuits and cheese to eventually end up here. And parents start to get worried that it's their kids and their family and their community that could be contributing to a big problem like that. Notice she also offers alternatives though. So why not a washable plastic bottle? She says, why not a common flask? Why those biscuits could not have been spread with cheese at home? So she is trying to present herself as practical and someone who has practical alternatives for things. She is trying to present a solution to this problem. So she goes on, she gets a bit more direct. I'm asking that we do away with excess packaging. I want the canteen to sell products that have no need for it. I hope to influence the staff to replace the coffee pod machine, those multiplying little pods, with a machine that filters the coffee straight into a jug. I might even ask our teachers to bring out our old communal teapot and do away with the pretty tea bags. Excuse me. So, she positions herself as a leader here, but she's still not asking parents yet. She is kind of positioning this issue as a whole school issue, a whole community issue. She's going to get the canteen involved. She's going to get her staff involved in the staff room. So here, parents aren't kind of shouldered with the burden of responsibility, and that's deliberate. She doesn't want, or she's trying not to make parents see this as just their problem. However, she does emphasize what parents can do. So, how many nights a week do you eat takeaway? Plastic boxes of beef, blah, 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 blah. I'm told you can buy carrots ready peeled, washed, and sliced in another plastic bag. And again, offering an alternative. Why not prepare your own snacks for the lunchbox? So, similar to that previous paragraph, more always phrased as questions, more examples of excess packaging and alternatives. And she ends, I know reducing our packaging will be a challenge at school and at home, but we must confront it for the sake of future generations. I will be implementing a curriculum unit to teach students about sustainability at every year level. As usual, your comments are welcome, Denise Walker, Principal. Okay, so we've already picked up lots of stuff, interestingly, particularly about structure, which is great. We've looked at the use of the visual. We've got a couple of techniques and a couple of words that have stood out to us, and there's plenty here for us to analyse. So let's have a quick look at the second text. This is from a parent called Louise. So Louise says, fair go, Denise. Look at that, fair go. And she also refers to Denise as her first name, interestingly. So think about that phrase, fair go. It's the ultimate Australian colloquial term. And she's using it in a way that suggests, it's like saying, come on, be realistic, step back and get your head out of the clouds. And this is kind of a little bit of a hint to where Louise is going to go with the rest of her comment. My partner and I have always supported your green ideas. We're already doing what we can. Our kids walk to school every day. They're really interested in what rubbish goes where. They love the chooks in the garden. So again, similar to, she kind of echoes Denise's suggestions that Spire Primary do have good environmental initiatives and their kids are part of those initiatives. And that way, Louise, similar to Denise, is trying to present herself as reasonable and as someone who is aware of environmental concerns. But mornings are chaos in our house as it is. How much worse if we have to spread cheese on biscuits, and won't they go soggy? Have you any idea how many plastic bottles we've lost over our time at Spire? And filling them also takes time. Both of us parents go to work. Okay, now she's, she's countering Denise's specific examples with her specific examples, and really trying to give Denise a dose of realism into what life as busy parents with small kids is like. And she uses words like chaos, and how much worse it would be. So again, parents who would be reading this would kind of would agree that, yeah, mornings with kids, that's really hard and it is chaotic, and they're going to be worried that those chaotic mornings, which they identify with, are going to get worse. And she says some really kind of logical, down-to-earth things. Filling bottles takes time. If we really have to spread cheese on biscuits, they'll be soggy in the lunchbox. Really down-to-earth, practical refutations to what Denise is saying. And she goes on with it here in this paragraph. So finally, why begrudge us all the odd, easy night off? Give us a break, basically. Takeaway food is often a lifesaver for busy people. Busy people, that's another phrase I'd pick up on. Everyone likes to think of themselves as really busy and really important. No one more so than parents of young kids will identify themselves as busy people. This is Louise's audience, it's Denise's too, and they, will more than likely agree that, yes, of course, takeaway is just an absolute lifesaver. This last sentence is interesting. It is a great shame if, for a vague principle, our lives become more difficult and we can't enjoy the benefits of 21st century living. So again, she's using inclusive language for a different reason now to Denise, she's kind of saying where Denise used it to warn people of the environmental responsibility being everyone's, Louise is using it to kind of say, um, to warn everyone about the personal ramifications of being really environmentally conscious. It means that your life will be more difficult and, perhaps less enjoyable as well. Look at this phrase as well, which I love, a vague principle. I'm sure I read this somewhere else, so I feel like I can't completely claim this as my idea, but a vague principle, obviously the word principle as in principal of a school is spelt with P-A-L at the end. Is this potentially a little play on words here? And Louise is just having a clever little witty jab, a vague principle, not meaning a vague idea or meaning that on the surface level, but then also having that double meaning of saying, Denise, you're a vague principle of this school. Your ideas are, maybe admirable, but they're vague, they're lofty, they're not down to earth, and they're completely out of touch with the lives of modern parents. Okay, so that is the article. That's the kind of thinking that I'd expect you to be going through as you're doing your 15 minutes reading time. Then, examiner says, right, writing time begins now, and you want to flip straight over to writing your response. And I'll give you a copy of this as well. So, a couple of things to remember. We teach you what, how, why as a structure for to kind of focus your analysis in your body paragraphs. So you want to consider what the arguments are, show that you've understood them, how the author gets them across, techniques, tone, structure, language choice, all that kind of stuff, and why they use it. What is the effect on the reader? How does it position the reader? You must analyse the visual, so all those garbage bags need to be talked about. We don't explicitly need a comparison paragraph, so while I did make some comparisons as I was going through there, I'm not going to dedicate a paragraph or any specific point in my essay to compare. Work through it chronologically and cover all main points. I'm going to start from the start, go through to the end, make sure I don't miss anything big, but also know that I can't cover everything. It's just not possible. And I'm going to write it to reflect the length of the texts. So in this case, I've got a page and a half article and a half-page comment. So I'll probably do 2 body paragraphs on the article and 1 on the comment. Okay, intro is all your basics. You might want to start with a sentence that just outlines the issue. I've kind of combined that with getting into some of the nitty-gritty of the first text. So the issue of packaging waste has recently arisen at Spire Primary School, with Principal Louise Walker using her weekly message on the school's website to address the topic to parents and other members of the school community. Okay, bam, I've got issue is covered. The author is covered. I've got the text type, and I've got the audience in there as well. One thing I am missing, and I would include in an edit, would be we've got the date here, the publication details, and this piece doesn't really have a title. You might call it Principal's Message, but it doesn't have a title for us to include, so that's fine. Now on her contention. So Walker expresses her concern about superfluous packaging, both globally and within the local school environment, and urges staff and parents to take measures to reduce packaging waste to avoid environmental damage. Spire parent Louise has responded to Walker's message with a comment that questions the practicality of the message suggested, particularly for busy parents. Okay, so all the basics are there. Again, with the second text, we just know the author's name is Louise, the text type is a comment, and we've got her contention in there. All the basics are there, and if you have a look, I did that in 3 sentences. So just a couple of sentences, get through all your basics. You should be able to do this in, a minute or 2, ideally, because you've done all your reading and your thinking, and then you want to get straight into the body paragraphs. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I will obviously link this for you so you can have a look. I just want to have a look at maybe one paragraph so we can have a look at the what, how, why structure and the kinds of things I've picked up to analyze. So, like I said, what stood out to me at the start was this kind of self-deprecating tone and quoting herself. So that's how I'm going to start. Walker begins by, and something like that is a nice prompt to get you going. So, author name, opens by, and then introduce their first argument. I've said she attempts a lighter tone in her introduction, playfully suggesting parents might be saying, oh no, to the new paths she is suggesting. Like we said, this self-deprecating approach aims to get readers on side by presenting herself as an approachable innovator, albeit one who is constantly pushing for environmental improvements. So you can see I've kind of, the what, how, why is all in there. The what being, she's suggesting parents might be saying, oh no, to the new paths she's suggesting. The how being the lighter tone, the self-deprecating approach, and the why being get readers on side by blah, 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 blah. Once you're confident with what, how, why, you don't need to move through them in that order. You can kind of weave through, you can weave them into sentences like I've done here. However, if you're still starting out with that approach with analysing argument, you're not confident, just try perhaps a sentence on each. So, she opens by arguing that, blah, blah, blah. She supports this with the use of, whatever technique, whatever tone, etc. This has the effect of blah, blah, blah. If you need to do that as you're starting or as you begin to feel more confident, then that's okay in those early stages. Okay, getting off track. She follows this up by listing Spy's environmental credentials, such as 4 different bins in the vegetable garden, as a way to acknowledge the progress the community has made and elicit a sense of pride in her readers in their school. By doing so, she endeavours to make readers more receptive to measures that will further their excellent environmental track record. So I'm trying to put a real focus on analysis. So you do have to do a little bit of kind of minimal summarizing just so the marker knows where you're up to, and so you can kind of follow your way through the text. So I've done that here. She follows this up by listing Spy's environmental credentials. Note that I've included some short embedded quotes to support what I'm saying and to enable the marker to kind of locate where I am in the piece. But overall, I am trying to focus it on analysis wherever possible. So acknowledging the progress the community's made, elicit a sense of pride, make readers more receptive to the measures she's suggesting. Then I really wanted to pick up on what I see as a tone shift that's really highlighted by this visual here. And that's what I want to finish off this paragraph on, some comments on this stuff, because that really stood out to me. So her upbeat tone shifts drastically as Walker goes on to express her increasing concern about the amount of superfluous packaging in our everyday lives. She speaks about this excess waste as a universal issue that will end up clogging, eventually, our country. This distressing idea is supported by a black and white photograph of large piles of rubbish bags against a smoggy sky. The mood of the image is bleak and ominous, suggesting imminent danger. The combination of this image with Walker's warnings paints a picture of quite a dangerous and depressing future, where our environment is dominated by harmful waste. Readers are left with grave concern over whether such a future can be prevented. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. There's certainly, I'll give you a link to the rest of the piece because this is a finished piece. There is, the thing about analysing argument, really with any essay, is there is just so much to include, potentially. You have to make your own calls about what is important to include and what is going to be worthy to include, and what, you can essentially do away with. So you will get better at that as you do more practice at analysing argument. Like I said, I've split the Walker piece into 2 paragraphs and then I finished with the body paragraph here. Just pointing out my conclusion, Conclusion is a formality, but it does need to be there. Sum up the issue and the two pieces really briefly, just so you've got something that finishes properly and doesn't end in the middle of nowhere. Okay, I'll leave it there. I will link you to both of these. I encourage you to have a look at the Aspire primary piece yourself, maybe have a go at writing a response, and certainly have a go at the other pieces from past exams on the VCAR website, as well as any other resources, exam pieces that are given to you by your teacher. Hope this helps.